he's wonderful, he's Johnny Carson, but I just was not, thinking, I was reluctant.
Right. Was it just one date then? No, it was
no,
more.
I was never a person that knew how to say no.
Sally Field, the sweet, soft-spoken Hollywood darling we've all adored for decades, just dropped a truth bomb that no one saw coming. On Watch What Happens Live, she spilled the tea about her secret romance with the legendary Johnny Carson. And trust me, it wasn't the fairy tale fling people imagined. She called it the octopus and the reluctant little guppy. And wait till you hear why. What she revealed next will make your jaw drop, so don't even blink, because this story gets wild. Sally Field recalls awkward romance with Johnny Carson. During a 2016 appearance on Bravo's late-night talk show, Watch What Happens Live, Academy Award-winning actress Sally Field found herself revisiting a part of her past she probably would have preferred to leave tucked away. She had come on the show to promote her film alongside her co-star Max Greenfield. But little did she know that one question would take her down memory lane to an unexpected and rather awkward chapter: her short-lived romantic involvement with none other than legendary late-night host Johnny Carson. It was Sally's very first time on the show, and host Andy Cohen was clearly determined to make it memorable. In true Watch What Happens Live fashion, he invited her to play his signature segment called Plead the Fifth, a game that challenges celebrity guests to answer uncomfortable questions honestly, though they're allowed to skip just one. As soon as Sally heard the question coming, her expression said it all. She gave a mix of a playful and pained smile, muttering, "Oh, uh-oh," while fixing Cohen with what he later described as a silly yet steely stare. You could almost sense her internal debate. Should she dodge the question, or just tell the truth and get it over with? When Cohen finally asked her to characterize her relationship with Carson, Sally laughed nervously, stuttered a little, and seemed to be choosing her words carefully, as if each one carried a bit of emotional weight. After all, how do you sum up something awkward and personal in front of a live audience? Rumors about their past had circulated for years, especially after Carson's lawyer mentioned their connection in a 2013 tell-all book. Many had assumed it was nothing more than a one-time date, a brief Hollywood dinner that never led anywhere. But Sally, to everyone's surprise, confirmed that they actually went out more than once. Still, the way she spoke about it made it clear it was not a fairy tale romance. She seemed both amused and uneasy as she shared bits and pieces, careful not to say too much, but also unwilling to deny the truth. Cohen, never one to let a good story slip by, pushed further, asking her what their dynamic was really like. That was when Sally offered a metaphor so vivid that it instantly caught everyone's attention. She compared their relationship to an octopus and a little guppy. Cohen couldn't help but laugh, commenting, "He was all hands with you, wasn't he?" Sally nodded slightly, her expression a mix of humor and discomfort. She quickly followed up by acknowledging Carson's charm and reputation, saying something along the lines of, "He's wonderful. He's Johnny Carson." But behind those polite words, it was clear that she had never been comfortable in that situation. She made it a point to clarify that she was never truly interested in him romantically, and that the relationship had been heading in a direction she didn't want. She admitted that back then, she had trouble speaking up or saying no directly. Haven't most people, at one point or another, struggled with that? That awkward feeling of not wanting to hurt someone's feelings, even when your own comfort is at stake. For Sally, that hesitation led her to take a rather strange approach. Instead of telling Carson outright that she wasn't interested, she came up with an elaborate excuse. She told him she had mental issues that made it difficult for her to pursue anything serious. It might sound absurd now, but in her mind, It seemed like the only way out of an uncomfortable situation. She later admitted that it was easier to make up something unusual than to face the confrontation head-on. Later, during an appearance on The View, Sally opened up more about that time in her life and the mindset that led her to handle things the way she did. She confessed that she had always found it hard to be direct, especially when it came to personal relationships. "I have trouble with, 'No, I'm simply not where you are, and I really think you're the world's most wonderful person,' she said. It was her way of acknowledging that she hadn't yet developed the confidence to assert her boundaries clearly. Her story wasn't just about Johnny Carson. It was about the version of herself she used to be, the one who wanted to avoid conflict, who feared disappointing others, and who found creative, if unusual, ways to escape uncomfortable situations. Her story, told with humility and humor, reminded viewers that even famous people, even Oscar winners, have their own awkward memories and their own moments of weakness. Sally Field's candidness turned what could have been a sensational headline into a relatable story about self-growth and boundaries. It made people reflect. Haven't we all, at some point, gone along with something we weren't comfortable with just because saying no felt too hard? Her laughter, her hesitation, and her honesty all painted a picture of someone who had learned from her past but wasn't ashamed to talk about it. In the end, what stood out wasn't the gossip about Johnny Carson, but the gentle reminder that confidence doesn't always come easy. It's something you build, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. And speaking of tough moments, what happened next proves that even the most graceful stars sometimes lose their balance when love turns complicated. Because behind every charming smile in Hollywood, there's a story you were never meant to hear, like the one where Sally Field, desperate to escape a relationship she could no longer bear, did something no one saw coming. Stay with me till the end. It's unforgettable. Sally Field fakes breakdown to end relationship. At that point in her life, Sally Field's way of dealing with unwanted advances said a lot about who she was and how she handled pressure. She wasn't the type to boldly confront someone or say exactly what was on her mind, even when she wanted to. Instead, she came up with a plan that was, to say the least, a little unusual. The situation with Johnny Carson had become increasingly uncomfortable for her, but rather than simply tell him she wasn't interested, she chose a route that felt safer to her, one built on an elaborate deception. It wasn't that she wanted to lie, it was that she didn't know how to do anything else without hurting someone or creating conflict. Wasn't that something many people could relate to? Wanting to escape a situation gracefully, but not having the words to do it? During an appearance on Watch What Happens Live, Field spoke candidly about this side of herself. She admitted that she simply didn't know how to say no to people. Those were her exact words. She said that saying no felt impossible, and that her need to please others often got her into situations she never truly wanted to be in. It wasn't about weakness or fear, really. It was more about wanting to avoid disappointment or tension. But as she shared, that tendency to go along with things she didn't want had a way of trapping her. It led her to moments where she had to come up with creative, sometimes extreme, ways to get out. How many people, one might wonder, have found themselves in that same place, so desperate to be polite that they ended up tangled in their own discomfort? Field explained that this habit didn't just appear when she dealt with Carson. It followed her through other parts of her life, too. She said that when she found herself in situations she couldn't handle or simply didn't want to face, she'd resort to telling people that she'd lost her mind. Yes, that was her coping mechanism. She would pretend that she was having some kind of breakdown just to escape. It became, in her own words, her signature escape strategy. Some might find that strange, But when she spoke about it, there was a kind of vulnerability and humor in her honesty. It wasn't something she was proud of, it was something she could finally laugh about and reflect on years later. When the situation with Carson reached its breaking point, Field's discomfort became impossible to ignore. She felt trapped in something she hadn't chosen, and yet she couldn't bring herself to say the simple truth, that she wasn't interested. Instead, she turned to her familiar pattern. She told Carson she was having a breakdown and that she was being sent away. Those were her words. "I told him I was having a breakdown and I was being sent away." She admitted that she simply couldn't figure out how to say, "I'm really just not into this." So, instead, she invented a dramatic story. She told him she was sorry and that she had to go away because they were going to put her in a home. It was such an over-the-top excuse that it almost sounded like something from a movie. Yet, strangely enough, it worked. Carson didn't press her for details, and he didn't pursue her afterward. Could it be that sometimes even the most ridiculous stories end up saving us from difficult truths? When Field shared this story with Andy Cohen, he immediately picked up on the meaning behind her earlier octopus and guppy metaphor, a reference she'd made to describe how uncomfortable she'd felt during her time with Carson. Cohen responded with a blunt remark, saying, "He was all hands with you." The audience reacted instantly, gasping and laughing, while Field herself showed a mix of embarrassment and relief that someone finally said it out loud. It was one of those moments where the tension in the room cracked open, and everyone understood what she had really been trying to express all along. Later, when Field appeared on The View to talk about the same experience, she explained her actions in an even more straightforward way. She said pretending to have a breakdown was the only way she could get out of it. That was how she put it. The only way. There was no drama in her tone, just a quiet acknowledgement of who she was back then and how little power she felt in that moment. Her openness about it struck a chord with viewers. Many saw in her confession a reflection of their own younger selves, people who didn't yet know how to speak up, who thought the only way to escape discomfort was through a little harmless fiction. Looking back, Field's story wasn't really about Carson or even about Hollywood. It was about the human tendency to shrink ourselves for the sake of peace. It was about the uncomfortable truth that sometimes it feels easier to make up an excuse than to simply say no. Before we dive into what Sally Field revealed, let's pause on the moment that made everyone stop and listen. Her confession, delivered with that trademark mix of humor and humility, reminded us that strength isn't a gift. It's a lesson learned over time. And if you think you've heard it all, stay with me till the very end, because this part hits deep. Sally Field reflects on her emotional growth at 79. Looking back on her life, Sally Field, now 79 years old and a two-time Academy Award winner, often finds herself reflecting on how far she has come, emotionally, personally, and professionally. It's almost impossible to imagine that the confident, outspoken woman people see today was once someone who struggled so deeply with confrontation that she would rather shrink into the background than speak up for herself. But as she's often said, that journey of learning to stand her ground was not an easy one. She shared that, in her younger years, she believed that, to be loved, she had to disappear. She explained how she used to think that keeping quiet and pleasing others was the safest way to be accepted. And really, how many people have felt that same pressure to stay small so they wouldn't upset anyone? Sally recalled that her difficulty with confrontation didn't start or end with her awkward encounter with Johnny Carson on national television. It was something deeply woven into who she was at the time. She spoke about how she grew up believing that her worth was tied to how well she could make other people comfortable, even if that meant sacrificing her own comfort. She revealed that in her late teens, she suffered from severe depression, a weight that hung over her every day, and that it wasn't until she found acting that she began to untangle the anxiety inside her. Acting, she said, became her way of searching for what was festering within, her way of asking herself the questions she had been too afraid to voice. Isn't it fascinating how sometimes people find healing in the very thing that scares them the most? For Sally, stepping into someone else's shoes on stage helped her finally start finding her own footing in real life. Over time, Sally admitted that it took her a very long while to stop viewing herself through other people's eyes. She said she used to constantly wonder what others thought of her, whether she was enough, whether she had disappointed anyone. It's a cycle so many people fall into, and Sally wasn't immune to it. She mentioned that, for years, she would make up excuses instead of simply saying no. She would twist herself into knots to avoid conflict, even when all she wanted was to speak her truth. She said she thought she was protecting herself, but in reality, she was disappearing a little more each time. And isn't that something so many people can relate to? The quiet exhaustion that comes from always trying to please everyone else? With age, however, came a new kind of clarity. Sally often talks about how she has learned to see her younger self with compassion instead of judgment. She no longer scolds herself for being timid back then. Instead, she sees it as part of her journey towards self-awareness. She said that aging has been a gift because it helped her realize that her voice matters, even when it shakes. There's something beautifully liberating in that realization, she noted, because once she stopped living for the approval of others, she started living for herself. And isn't that the turning point for so many people? The moment they stop seeking validation and start embracing who they really are? Field has become someone who doesn't shy away from hard conversations anymore. She's spoken about how she's no longer afraid to set boundaries or to tell her truth, even if it makes people uncomfortable. She said that learning to say no without guilt was one of the hardest yet most rewarding lessons of her life. She also shared that her years of depression, self-doubt, and fear of confrontation shaped her empathy, her patience, and her understanding of others. She believes that people are all just doing their best with the tools they have, and sometimes it takes a lifetime to realize that saying no doesn't make you unkind. It makes you honest. Now, when she looks back at that shy, anxious girl who once thought love had to be earned through silence, she feels nothing but tenderness. She sees someone who was trying to survive in a world that didn't always make room for her voice. Sally said she's proud of that girl because, even through fear and doubt, she kept moving forward. She kept searching for truth, both in her art and in herself. And really, isn't that what growth is all about? Becoming brave enough to be your real self, even after years of hiding? Today, Sally Field stands as a woman who has learned that confrontation isn't about anger or aggression. It's about honesty, about standing in your own truth without apology. She said she no longer hides behind excuses or lets fear dictate her choices. Instead, she speaks with the quiet assurance of someone who has seen life in all its messy beauty and come out stronger for it. The kind of strength that isn't loud, but deeply felt. And just when you think you know her story, Sally Field opens up about the powerful lesson that changed everything. Stay with us. You'll want to hear this. Sally Field shares how she's learned to value herself. In recent years, Sally Field has found something that had long seemed elusive to her. A quiet kind of peace that comes from finally learning to appreciate herself. Those close to her have often said that she seemed lighter these days, more at ease in her own company. She was once quoted explaining that if a person could learn to be whole within themselves, if they could own who they truly were, and bring all their scattered pieces together, they would find that they kept great company with themselves. It was a gentle reminder that happiness doesn't always come from others, but often from the stillness found within. Her journey toward that realization wasn't quick or easy, but rather something that unfolded gradually, shaped by years of reflection, experience, and the courage to face her own insecurities. For a long time, Sally had felt the constant need to prove her worth to her peers, to Hollywood, and, perhaps most painfully, to herself. But, as a close friend once remarked, those days were behind her. She no longer carried the weight of other people's expectations, nor did she measure her value by the approval of others. She had finally reached a point in her life where she no longer needed to impress anyone. Now, she moves through her days with a confidence that feels natural, not performed. She's comfortable in her skin, unbothered by the imperfections that once troubled her, and deeply aware of her own worth. Isn't that what most people spend their entire lives chasing? A sense of contentment that doesn't depend on anyone else's opinion? Sally seemed to think so. She spoke openly about her happiness and independence, even adding with a laugh that she had no desire to wake up and pick up anyone else's underwear in the morning. It was her humorous way of saying that she enjoyed her solitude and that she cherished the freedom that came with being her own person. For someone who had spent much of her life trying to please others, this new chapter represented a refreshing change. A woman no longer bound by the expectations that once confined her. When she said, "Behind my years I have value," it was clear that this wasn't just a passing statement. It was a reflection of everything she had come to understand about herself. Those few words carried the weight of her entire journey, speaking volumes about her growth and self-realization. She had come to see that age wasn't something to hide from or deny, but something that added layers of depth and strength to her character. And isn't it fascinating how people often spend their youth trying to rush ahead, only to realize later that every year adds something irreplaceable to who they are? Sally's perspective offered a kind of quiet wisdom that only comes from living long enough to see how life really works. She also acknowledged that the process of growth never truly ends. She believed that no matter how old a person becomes, they are always, in some way, coming of age. To her, it was a lifelong unfolding, a constant discovery of new parts of oneself. She said that with each passing year, she found more certainty in who she was. And whether that certainty turned out to be a blessing or a curse didn't matter much. It was simply part of being alive. There was something beautifully human about that acceptance. The way she spoke about aging not as a decline, but as an evolution. It made one wonder, what if growing older wasn't about losing things, but about gaining the courage to stand firmly in one's truth? As she reflected on her life, Sally admitted that she no longer worried about what people thought of her. That freedom, she said, felt like a comfortable place to be. And truly, what could be more freeing than that? To no longer carry the burden of other people's judgments, to simply live according to one's own rhythm. That was the kind of peace she had finally found. Those who know her say she radiates calm these days. The kind of calm that only comes when a person has made peace with both their past and their present. She no longer chases approval, no longer seeks validation. She simply lives, softly, steadily, and wholly as herself. And perhaps, in a world where so many struggle to find that same peace, her story stands as a quiet reminder that self-acceptance is not a destination, but a lifelong journey worth taking. Sally Field promotes new film and embraces aging. In 2015, Sally Field, a beloved veteran of film and television, took on a role that seemed to reflect her own journey through the later stages of life. She was promoting her new film, Hello, My Name is Doris, alongside Max Greenfield, and it was clear that this project held a special meaning for her. The movie told the story of Doris, a quirky 60-something woman who unexpectedly finds herself falling for a much younger co-worker. The film, which premiered at the SXSW Film Festival on March 14, 2015, wasn't just another light romantic comedy. It was a touching exploration of loneliness, self-discovery, and the idea that it's never too late to chase a bit of happiness. Critics took notice too, earning Field a Critics' Choice Movie Award nomination for Best Actress in a Comedy. When Field spoke about the story, she mentioned how deeply it resonated with her. She said it was more than a love story. It was a look at what age really means. What does it mean to grow older in a world that often forgets those past their prime? And more importantly, what does it mean to still want more out of life when the world expects you to settle quietly? For Field, Doris wasn't just a role. It was almost like holding up a mirror to her own life. After all, she had spent over 50 years in the entertainment industry, constantly evolving and defying expectations. She often reflected on how her career had started in the 1960s with light-hearted television roles like Gidget and The Flying Nun. Who could have predicted that this cheerful young actress would one day become a two-time Academy Award winner? Her performances in Norma Rae and Places in the Heart weren't just milestones. They were statements of strength, independence, and emotional honesty. Over time, she became not only a respected actress, but a symbol of perseverance in an industry known for its fleeting attention span. How many actors could say they stayed relevant for over half a century, constantly reinventing themselves while staying true to who they were? By the time she reached her 70s, Field had learned to see aging in a new light. During the promotion of Hello, My Name is Doris, she spoke with striking honesty about the process of getting older. She said quite plainly, "I'm an old woman. 70 is old, and that's okay." There was no hesitation in her voice, no apology in her tone. She had earned her years, and she was proud of them. She talked about gathering strength through time, about owning her age rather than running from it. She believed that every wrinkle and every gray hair carried a story, a record of experience and resilience that youth simply couldn't offer. "Behind my years," she said, "I have value that doesn't come when you're 50 or 40 or 30 or 20. Her words were simple, but they carried so much truth. Wasn't it remarkable how some people, instead of dreading age, learned to see it as a badge of honor? In a world that constantly celebrates youth and beauty, Field's perspective felt refreshing. She wasn't trying to chase her younger self. She was embracing the woman she had become. She understood that time had shaped her into someone wiser, calmer, and more grounded. She wasn't pretending that growing older was easy. It came with its challenges, but she refused to see it as a loss. Instead, it was a transformation. She had learned, through life's many seasons, that there was power in acceptance. Could it be that true beauty comes not from resisting time, but from embracing it fully? Even in her later interviews, when she looked back on her long career, Field spoke with both humility and pride. She had seen Hollywood change countless times. Styles shifted, stars came and went, and yet she remained, quietly proving that talent and authenticity never age out of relevance. She said she had no intention of slowing down, and it was clear she still had the same spark that fueled her when she was a young actress trying to prove herself. Her recognition in 2023 with the Screen Actors Guild Life Achievement Award only reaffirmed that she was not just a survivor of Hollywood's harshness, but a defining part of its heart. As she reflected on her journey, Sally Field reminded people that life doesn't lose its meaning with age, it deepens. Her portrayal in Hello, My Name is Doris wasn't merely acting, it was an extension of her truth. Through Doris, she gave a voice to women who felt invisible, showing that it's never too late to be seen, to be loved, or to start anew. And really, isn't that what makes her so timeless? She had lived through decades of change, both in her career and in her personal life, yet she never stopped learning, growing, and reaching for more. Her story wasn't just about Hollywood. It was about courage, reinvention, and the quiet beauty of owning every single chapter of one's life. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.